Okay, I'm going to start with a question today. I want you to think about how you would answer this. And if you have a pen nearby, you might want to grab it and you just jot some words down on your program to think about. What words would you use to describe your relationship with God in 2022? And it's whatever comes to mind, okay? Top of the mind. Whatever comes to mind. There's no right or wrong to this. What words come to mind when you think about the answer to that question? What words would you use to describe your relationship with God in the last year? 2022, what words would you use? Again, no right or wrong, it's just whatever your personal experience was. For some of you, you might use words like exciting or powerful or life-changing or loving or close. Others of you might use words like what relationship or frustrating or unimportant or irrelevant or even discouraging. So it's interesting, when I thought about my answer to that, it definitely depends upon the time of the year when you asked me. Because I've told you before, my year went like this. It was like this supercharged, really cool, close relationship with God, and then the bottom fell out, and I'll tell you why today. And then toward November and December, it just really went back up, and I am so excited that it's in the spot it is today. So I could pick words from both of those lists based on what happened to me in last year, but I'll tell you what I want. In 2023, I want to experience more of the words on the left side. I want more of God in 2023. And I know what's possible. One of the things that I like to do in January is I like to go back and revisit. I have a couple of heroes in the faith, people that I really, really love to read their biographies. One of my heroes in the faith is this guy. His name is Frank Laubach. In 1930, he was 45 years old. And on his 46th birthday, he was a big journaler. He was journaling. At the time, he had been a Christian for 16 years. He was a missionary in the Philippines, and he was incredibly discouraged about this whole thing called Christianity. He was so frustrated and upset. In his journal, he wrote this really honest entry about how he was even at the point where he just wanted to rebel against God. It's like, just forget it. There is nothing to this God thing. I'm done. So that was 1930 on his 46th birthday. Something happened that year that changed his whole life. And here is how the second half of his life went. For the next 40 years, his life changed so dramatically that he began to have worldwide influence. The Encyclopedia Britannica noted that he was the single greatest educator of modern times. He was voted the man of the year in America. In the last 40 years of his life, he wrote 50 books, became an international presence, having an influence on poverty, injustice, illiteracy worldwide. He spoke to presidents around the globe. And so the question is, what happened in 1930 at the age of 46? Here's what he wrote in his journal. And his book, Practicing His Presence, is just one of my must-reads. I try and read it every year. Short little book. He said this. 2 years ago, he said, a profound dissatisfaction, and wrote, obviously, this was a couple years afterwards. He said, a profound dissatisfaction led me to begin trying to line up my actions with the will of God about every 15 minutes or every half hour. People said it was impossible. He said, I judge from what I learned that few people are even really trying to do this. But he said, that year I started to live all my waking moments in the conscious listening to the inner voice of God, asking him without ceasing, what, Father, do you desire this minute? So he was constantly asking this little prayer. His original goal was every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, and then he started moving it up to trying to do it once a minute. It's like, what do you want me to do right now? What do you desire in this moment? He said, and I agree with this, he said, that is exactly what Jesus was doing all day, every day. If you read the life of Jesus in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there is no doubt that that was what the obsession of his mind was. Completely agree with that. So then he started journaling about what was happening in his life. He said, after 30 days, he wrote in his journal, I feel a joy that I have never experienced in the entire 16 years of being a Christian. He said, the sense of cooperating with God in the little things is what astonishes me. He said, I need something and I turn around to find it waiting for me. I must work to be sure, but there's God working along with me. If you think back through 2022, is that how your life felt? It's like I worked, but man, was God working right there alongside me. I could see him working all the time in my life, the lives of the people I love. He said, God takes care of all the rest. My part is to live this hour in this continuous inner conversation with God, in imperfect responsiveness to his will, and that's what makes this hour gloriously rich. Seems to be all I need to think about. After 60 days of running this experiment, he wrote this in his journal. He said, this is so interesting. He said, I'm not very successful. He would write that he failed about 2/3 of the day to keep that thought in his mind. So he wasn't perfect at all, but he said the outcome of it was so dramatic. He said this concentrating upon God is strenuous, but he said everything else has stopped to be so. He said this, I think more clearly, I forget less frequently. How many of you would like that? Right? Things which I did with a strain before, I now do easily and with no effort whatsoever. Listen to this, I worry about nothing. How many of you would like that for 2023? To not spend 1 second of your life worrying about anything. He said, I lose no sleep. A year later, he said, it is difficult to convey to anyone else the joy of having broken into this new sea of realizing God's, what he called God's here-ness, that he is here with me. So if you were listening to, and I love this, he said, the moment I turn to him, it's like turning on an electric current, which I feel through my whole being. Isn't that amazing? If you were asking Frank what his life with God was like, he would say partnership, indescribable joy, constant activity of God, supernatural life, and unexpected power. And this is what I want for 2023. Do you want anything on that list? Is there any part of that sounds attractive to you? We're in a series that we've called This Is My Year. And this year, what I really want is I want to experience God more in this year than I've ever experienced him. His love, his power, his joy, all of those things that you just heard that guy talking about. So we're going to jump into this. How do you do it? I want to ask you to open your program, grab your notes. There are going to be some things I'm going to have you write down. And of course, welcome to those of you watching online. So glad you're there. Grab your notes. If you go to our website at pennyhillchurchlife.com, you can download these for free. I'm going to want you to write some things down as we jump into this. And we're going to start with, of course, point number 2. Point number 2, we're going to talk about this. This is where I just want to talk about 2 things today. You have to learn, if you want to experience this kind of life with God, you've got to learn how to pursue God as the only real treasure of this world. He has to become the only real treasure of this world for you. Not one of many treasures. He has to become the only real treasure of this world. You certainly hear that in what Frank Laubach was able to do with the way that he started praying. So back in November, I stumbled upon something that really impacted me, and I've been showing this to you. I've shown this to you a couple of times over the last few months. I'm going to show it again. I'm not going to let it go because I think it's so valuable. And I want you to think about, and don't respond out loud, just in your own mind, what level do you live at? Level 1 is blind faith. We believe that God is with us, but we're never aware of his presence, and we see no activity of God. For some of you, if I said, tell me the stories of 2022 where you saw God show up and do something that could not be anything other than God, you would have nothing to say. And that's common among Christianity. It's common. We live with no sense of his presence with us, even though he promised that he's with us. We see no activity of God in our lives, but we still believe in him. It's not that our faith is in question. It's just that there is no experience of God in this world. And we're content with that. So many Christians are content with that. That's just how it is. That's just how it's always going to be. And that is not how it has to be. You have to cut so much of the New Testament to pieces to live at this level, and yet this is what happens. I'll show you why it happens. But some Christians, they take different steps through the year, and all of a sudden they sense God's presence. Occasionally they become aware of his presence. You know, Frank wrote about this amazing joy that comes when you live with the presence of God in your life and you're aware of it. And so some of you had those experiences. You've been in a place where you were, maybe it was out at night on a walk, and the sky was just, the stars were just so bright, and all of a sudden you just so were aware of his presence. Or maybe you were worshiping and you heard a song come on the radio and it just hit you at the moment of where you lived and you were aware of his presence. But it just goes away then. And then some live at this level where they see God work, and you see the results of God at work in your life. Prayer becomes exciting. You see him changing your life and the lives of the people around you. You see him opening doors that you could never open, because that's what he's offered. Do you know that in the New Testament it literally says that the power that raised Jesus Christ from the dead, okay, you and I don't have that power. You can go to any cemetery around here afterwards and try and raise anyone from the dead, and you will fail, right? Any of you think you got that power? You don't have that power, but God does. And he says the power that raised Christ from the dead is now aimed at you who believe in Jesus. That is unstoppable power in our world. And so you should be able to see results of that power at work in your life, right? And some do, and they get to see God at work in their lives. And then some develop what Frank had, this conversational relationship with God, which becomes the most important word in the New Testament, friendship. You can read about it in John 15, where Jesus twice says, here's my offer to you. It's friendship. It's friendship. That's what he's offering you. The closest relationship in your life, friendship with a personal God who is willing to communicate with you. And your soul only comes alive at the later levels. That's it. That's it. Because we have to switch the mentality that we have in America that we are a human body with a soul. It's the wrong way to look at it. You are an eternal soul with a very, very temporary physical body, right? You're not a body that has a soul. You are an eternal soul that has a very temporary physical body. That's what you are. And your soul only comes alive when it connects to eternal things, in this case, God. And it comes alive when you connect your soul to Jesus. This is what Jesus said. He said, I want you to think of it this way. He said, I want you to think of it like a vineyard. And he said, in John 15, he said, I want you to understand, here's the reality. He said, you're just all branches. I'm a branch, you're a branch. All of us, we're branches. And he said, I'm the vine. And here's what he said, specifically. In John 15, he said, if you will remain in me, then I will remain in you. And then he promises your life will change. A branch can't produce fruit if it's severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. I mean, you all understand that. If we go out even today and cut a branch off this tree and throw it on the ground, next spring, will we expect it to start to have leaves? No, of course not. It's disconnected, and that's what Jesus is saying. He said, I'm the vine, the source of life. You have a choice every day. You can remain in me or not remain in me, every day. And he says, here's my command to you, remain in me, and here's my promise back to you. If you do that, I will remain in you. And then all of a sudden, you get all of these things that he talks about. There's this fruit, which we'll get into in just a moment. But I've got a friend who's my accountability and goal-setting partner. He and I set goals together every year. And we have constant conversations about spiritual themes. And earlier this year, a few months ago, we were talking about some of the things we're going to be talking about here, about what it really means to stay connected to God. And he's had some bad experiences with this. He's like really discouraged, and so he started doing some of the things that we're talking about. Setting time aside each day to be alone with God, to remain in Jesus. This week, and he gave me permission to share this with you, he wrote me this. He texted me this. He said, oh my goodness. If you would have told me even 6 months ago that at some point before I die, that I would actively be looking for study Bibles and Bible commentaries, I would have thought that you were crazy. He said, my dad actually gave me his marked up study Bible, and when I get home, I'm going to have to start using it in my daily, listen to this, my daily time with God. He said, this is literally crazy to me. I am sitting here smiling, tears welling up. The desire to learn what God is trying to convey in his word has never been this strong, and it feels so foreign to my former self, yet the pull to do so is so strong. His life being changed. Why? Because if you remain in him, he'll remain in you, and once you do, your life begins to change. Your life begins to change, and my friend's life is truly changing. Is that what it feels like for you? Here's why it's so significant. Jesus made some incredible promises when he was here. He said, if you seek him, you will find him. Did you know that's a promise? It's not optional. It's not maybe. It is a guarantee. If you seek him, you find him. Matter of fact, he actually promises if you draw near to God, he will draw near to you. It's a promise in the Bible. It's ironclad. Either if he lied about any of them, any of the promises he's made, and there's thousands of promises in the Bible, then he's a liar about everything. We can't trust him. There is no lie in the Bible. He promised it. He has to do it. That means that if you will do this, he will do that. If you draw near to him, he will draw near to you. The problem with this isn't what God has offered. The problem is the world that we live in. We live in the most distracting society that the world's ever created. American culture says this to us all the time, and it's not even subtle about it. It's like, oh, that God stuff is nice. It's nice in its place. Over here on the side, like a little puppy. Right? Puppies are cute and they're nice, but you can just have the puppy and leave the puppy. It's someone else's puppy. It's a nice little puppy. That's cute. But what really matters in your life is more. Oh my goodness, you need more. You need more money, and you need more achievement, and you need more success, and you need more of everything. Your house isn't nice enough yet. Your kitchen isn't nice enough yet. Your car isn't nice enough yet. You don't have enough saved for retirement yet. You need more. I mean, God stuff, he's kind of cool and all. He's like a nice puppy. It's cute and nice and all, but more. And that's what we buy into all the time. And so we walk away from God because the world tells us it's nice and all, but it's not what's going to make you happy. And we buy a lie. And the reason why some of you have only known these lower levels is because anytime you allow something to go into the spot where only God belongs, you lose God. Because it only happens if you remain in him. Your life changes if you remain in him. And if you let something into that spot where only God belongs, in the top spot is the real treasure of this world, because the eternal God can change our eternal souls, and Amazon can't. Right? It can't. And whatever I have in my retirement account can't. But a living God of unbelievable power now, he can. So how do I know if God is in the right place in my life? Well, there is one question that I've found that is so helpful for me, and I will share this with you. So how do you respond, and on your notes, write this down, how do you respond when God doesn't give you what you've asked for? How do you respond when God doesn't give you what you've asked for? It's one of the most important questions I've ever learned. How do you respond when God doesn't give you what you asked for? So, I've done this wrong. I've done this wrong a lot. I hope someday to be able to stop saying those words about this topic, but I've done it wrong a lot. Years and years ago, I read this verse, one of the most important verses in the Bible. Hebrews 11:6 says, "It is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him." So here's what he says. You will never know God if you don't step out in faith. You got to trust him. And he says there's two things you got to believe. You got to believe that God exists, which is most Americans. 90% of all Americans believe that God exists. Okay. But he says then you also have to believe that he will reward those who sincerely seek him. So again, back to that promise that Jesus made, if you seek him, you'll find him. The problem was, what tripped me up years and years ago, being honest with you, was that word right there. Rewards. Okay? I put this in my prayer notebook, and I began to pray this promise back to God over and over and over and over again for years and years and years. And what I did, and I believed everything about this verse, I was just misapplying it, because I thought that what was most important were the rewards God was about to give me. I thought that's what the verse was about. Okay? I'm going to believe him. I'm going to trust him. He's going to give me rewards. Because that's what the verse says. And I would quote this verse back, pray it. And finally, after years and years, I'm not kidding, years of praying this, I was on vacation and I was reading that verse in Hebrews, and I got a little bit mad at God. And by the way, I don't know about you, but for me, the only way that my spiritual life really takes off is when I express my honest thoughts to God. Every time I get to that point and I'm really honest with him, and it's always scary to me. It's like, because if you're really that honest with God, won't you get a lightning bolt to the back of the head? I mean, that's what it feels like. Every time, in all these years of doing it, I said to God, as I was praying that verse, I'm like, I don't even want to pray these words to you anymore, because you are not keeping your promise to me. You said I'd be rewarded, and I was thinking earthly rewards. I would be more successful in my job, and my savings would go up, and things would never break down. I'd get all these rewards in the world, and my golf score would get better. It's like, yeah, all right, this is awesome. And it's like, you are not telling the truth about this, because I'm following you, I believe in you, I'm not getting rewarded. And this is how it happens when I'm really honest about my frustrations with God. Almost immediately, I really saw the verse for what it's actually saying. He's not saying that you will get materialistic rewards in this world, is he? What's he saying that you'll get? Well, the reward is him. He's the reward. Not stuff he can give me. He himself is the reward. And all of a sudden it was crystal clear to me. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm a God user. I'm a God user. I'm using God to get more in this world, as if more was the treasure. And the moment I became aware of this, it was a repentance moment. It's like, I'm so sorry, God. I'm using you to get stuff in this world, and that's never going to work. Please forgive me. And I began to make a shift. And here's the prayer I began to pray, and I've been praying this prayer for years now. And I challenge you to, I encourage you to pray this prayer too. Oftentimes I hold my two hands out like this, and I say to God, God, if you were to give me everything I'd ever wanted, if you were to appear in front of me right now and say, Brian, you can have everything. Anything you've ever wanted. You want to be a scratch golfer? You are now scratch golfer, right? You want to eat all the chocolate you've ever wanted without gaining an ounce of weight? It's yours, right? You want that job that you want so bad? You want to retire in a year and a half? You want whatever you want. You can have anything. If God was standing in front of me and said, all my desires, and then he said, you can have all of that, or you can get to know me better. Which one do you choose? And I literally picture this, and then I do this in my prayer. That you can let all that go. All of it. It's meaningless. It doesn't make my soul come alive. You're the only source of joy and love and power in this world. You're what I want, and I choose you. And if it's choice between anything I want and you, I choose you. And I get my heart in the place where that's the decision I'm willing to make every day. What happens in your heart when God says no to you? And for some of you, you're struggling spiritually right now because you've been asking for something and it hasn't happened, and you're mad at him because, after all, it's about him giving you what you want in this world. Listen, I don't know what he'll do, but I always know your life will be better when you turn it like this and say, you, God, over everything else. You got to pursue God as the only real treasure of the world. And then you remember, we don't seek God to gain the stuff of this world. We seek God himself as the reward. So do I want something more than I want him? The only other thing I want to tell you is this. Then we begin to practice these daily connection habits. If he's the reward and he's the treasure and everything will work better in my life when he's in that top spot, then you have to add these daily connection habits. You got to put them in place in your life, because that's what he said, right? He said, remain in me and then I'll remain in you. So how do you remain in him? You go to church once in a while? You say a prayer before a meal? I don't know if you ever saw there was a movie years ago, back when I was in high school, about the life of Gandhi. And I don't know if you ever saw this movie. I saw it. And in there, there's this scene where Gandhi and this pastor are walking along on the sidewalk, and all of a sudden all these people gather around them, and their lives are in danger. And at the last minute, someone intervenes, and they're saved. And the pastor says to Gandhi, whew, that was lucky. And Gandhi says, wait, aren't you a man of God? And the pastor said, well, I am, but I don't believe he plans his day around me. And I read that sentence and I thought, and there is the problem. So many Christians actually believe that sentence. We literally think that we're kind of on our own in this world. No wonder we're worried and anxious and scared, just at the same level that even unbelievers are. And we're just kind of on our own. If it's to be, it's up to us. The exact opposite is actually what Jesus portrayed. Do you know that God the Father pays so much attention to you that in his spare time, he counts the number of hairs you have on your head? Did you know that? That's what Jesus said. He knows the number of hairs on your head. Some of you, that's not a hard count, right? So it's easy to get to, it's like 7. Okay, I'm done. Right? It's like, oh, yeah. The point is that God is focused on you. And because he's omnipresent, he's God, he can focus on each one of us individually at the same level. There's never a moment his thoughts aren't aimed at you and his attention isn't directed at you. You're never alone. That's what Jesus said. Jesus said this. He went on. Matter of fact, the very next verse in John 15, he he continued it, I am the vine and you're the branches. And he said this, here's the offer from God. Those who remain in me and I in them, they'll produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. You know, some of you are like, what is this fruit that he keeps talking about? Am I going to go home, there'll be strawberries on my table? I mean, what is he saying with this fruit? Well, again, he's saying two things, and the Bible explains this clearly. First, there is internal fruit. Things change inside me when I learn how to remain connected to Jesus. The internal fruit is things like joy and calm and peace. Supernatural love. You know what that is? That's love, even the ability to love your enemies. Is that what you have today? Do you have the ability to love even your enemies? It's the offer of God in the Bible. How about supernatural patience? Moms, is that what your kids say to you? Mom, you are supernaturally patient, right? Dads, is that what they say? They say this about us? It's internal changes. If you want to read about it, go read in Galatians chapter 5. He lists all these qualities, this internal fruit that you can have from God. But that's not all. Then he talks about external fruit. Things, God-changing things that you can never change. Is that what you have in your life? You see things that are changing in your life externally because God is just doing it. Like Frank said at the beginning, it's like, it's not that I don't have to work. I work and I turn around. It's like God is right there with me working alongside of me. God dramatically answering prayer. When was the last time you saw God even answer a prayer? God opening doors up for you supernaturally. This is the fruit that he's talking about. And he says the key is that we have to learn how to remain in him. Do you want anything on that slide? If you want it, then you remain in him. And so this is the command. Remain in me. Okay, so how do you do it? I daily prioritize my relationship with God above everything else. Nothing else trumps that. I have to remain in him. I daily prioritize my relationship with God above everything else. So for me, this means a couple of things, and I know I have been talking about this a lot over the last few months because this has been what's rejuvenated my connection with God. Why I can say, if you asked me to tell you stories in the last few months of where I've seen God show up in my life and do things that I could not do, I can tell you stories. I can tell you stories of God changing something inside of me that I didn't honestly think would ever change because of his grace. He just gives these things to you. So the first thing we talk about all the time is learn how to spend 15 minutes a day with God. Start your day with this. And if you've been here at all, you've heard me talk about it constantly. If you're watching online, if you just send us an email, we can send you this in the mail. But for those of you here, there's a notebook right in the back. And take the notebook inside the open cover, or if you already have a notebook, there's sheets on the back. One side of the sheet will show you exactly how do you read the Bible and get anything out of it, because it's a big book. So I'll walk you right through that. And the other side is how do you pray in a way that connects you to God. So this is what's changing my friend. Why my friend texted me that this week is because this is the first thing he's been working on. It's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know. So that's the first thing. But then the second thing is something I've only talked about this one time. It was probably 12 years ago. Start a 60-60 experiment because I want you to experience this. And if you flip your notes over on the back, I've got that experiment listed out on all the steps that you take in order to run this experiment. So you can look at that on your own. Look up here at the slide. I just want to walk you through the key elements of what's on the back. Okay, so first, for the next 60 days, you try and stay in a continuous and honest conversation with God. Honest. If you're frustrated, tell him. If you're angry at him, tell him. You hold nothing back. You tell him everything. You start it. For the next 60 days, you're going to do this continuous, honest conversation with God. Set alarms on your phone. I set more alarms this week than I have set in a long, long time. So I've got alarms going off on my phone all the time. And when the alarm goes off, you just turn your thoughts back to him. That's what it means to remain in him. The Bible tells you to set your mind on things above. That's what you're doing. You're setting your mind back on things above. You're setting your mind back on God. And you're saying to him, show me your will in this next moment. And then if he shows you something, you got to take a risk. You're really listening for him. So I challenged a group of people to do this, like I said, about 12 years ago. The stories of what happened in their life were amazing. Here's one of the stories. One person wrote back after 60 days and said, I've developed the art of staying connected to God through the day, and God is producing something in me I've always wanted: peace, love, and self-control. God, and I love this struggle, God has been gently pulling me out of this deep hole that I've dug, but I find that there's something in me that still wants me to keep one foot in that hole, because deep down I feel like I may want to crawl back in it. What is it about us that it's like somehow we like the misery? Like he starts pulling us out and we want to keep one foot in it. But they said, I'm tasting something I've always wanted, growing within, something full of life, peaceful, and yet exciting at the same time. Is that what you want? I've got a page of stories of people who've had the exact same experience. You set your alarm so that it's every hour you're turning your attention back to God. And you're saying to him, it's about your will in this moment, not mine. Now, okay, so let me be really, really honest with you. I did that experiment years ago, loved it, and it was the greatest spiritual high I've ever felt in my life. It was just like Frank Laubach described at the beginning. And then it was like slowly, it just started to be less and less effective, and then it went down to, it's like, what's wrong? And every year, I've gone back to it again and again, trying to figure out what's wrong. And it's never created the same impact that it did that first year. So to be honest with you, this last week when I was prepping all this and writing it, I knew this was all true. I knew what I'd experienced, and I got a little angry at God. So remember what I said? You won't experience him until you're honest with him. I told him, I'm a little frustrated. You said that if I draw near to you, you will draw near to me. How come you let me have that incredible experience all those years ago, and now I do the same thing and it doesn't work? And I'm giving you the cleaned up version. I didn't swear, but I was mad and very angry and frustrated. It's like, why would you do that? And over the last 24 hours, he showed me the problem. This is how he always works in my life. If I will cry out to him in honest frustration about what I'm dealing with, then he will show me. But he often waits till I cry out. And what he showed me is the goal of this whole thing is that you and I get our hearts to the place where we say, your will be done. Your will be done. You know what I do all the time? Is I say to God, our will be done. Won't that be nice? Our will be done. Because I've got a plan, and I've got a will, and I got things I want. And so we'll just kind of blend it all together. God, won't this be wonderful? And our will be done. And I'll work really, really hard, and all you have to do is come alongside and bless it all. I mean, look what I'll do for you. And I literally drive myself crazy. I literally work myself into stupid levels of exhaustion. I strive and strive and strive, and I lose all sense of God. And I've done this. My earliest time I can remember doing it was 17 years old, and I'm 52, and I do it all the time. So don't make my mistake. I am telling God today, your will is the only thing that matters. Mine will only take me away from you. I surrender my will to yours. If you'll just show me what you want, then that's what I want to do, regardless of what I have in my own heart. And since making that change, immediately, right back to what I was experiencing all those years ago, God begins to change you inside and change what you can't change. And I'm going to be telling you stories in the weeks ahead of what my God did the moment I surrendered and gave control over to Him. So don't make my mistake. So here's what I want to challenge you with as you walk out here today. Take a kit, one of those notebooks. If you're watching online, just email us. Send us an email at the church and go to our website. You can send us an email. We'll send you a kit in the mail. Spend 15 minutes a day. Set your alarm. Hey, set it right now. Set your alarm 15 minutes earlier than you need to right now so that you can spend this time alone with God. Take this 60-60 challenge. By the way, if you're going to do that, would you write on your card in your program, write 60-60 challenge. You're going to try every 60 minutes for the next 60 days to turn your attention back to God. Okay? And don't be discouraged if you miss entire chunks of the day. Who cares? Didn't you hear what Frank said? I miss it all the time, and still it's changing me. It's okay. But you're really getting your will out of the way so that His will is what matters most to you. Set, at least 8 alarms on your phone. You can set more than that if you want. And what you're saying in that moment is that surrender phrase, Father, what do you want said or done in this moment? And you give your will to Him. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish up today. For some of you listening, this sounds so crazy because you've only known those lower levels of faith. You've only known information about God and information about Jesus, and you've heard about Him and what He did. And that just is okay, it's interesting, but you've never really been transformed by this real relationship with a real God. And that's what He's offering you, make no mistake about it. Jesus didn't come to offer you information, He came to offer you Himself and friendship. He came to enter into your life in an individual way. That's why He died on the cross. On our own, we are incapable of being in the presence of God because we've been unloving in this world, and He never has been. And so, this great God of love sent His Son Jesus to pay for our debt and mistakes in this world, completely paid for, in full. And if you will ask Jesus, He will forgive you. And He will take up His residence inside of you, make your heart His home. That's what the Bible says. And if you want that gift, this will change your life. You can just say something like this to Him. Say it sincerely. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I need you. I'm asking you to please forgive me. I'm telling you today that I believe in you with the faith that I have. And I want you. I want to really know you today. Please give me that gift in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, as we finish, if you grab your card out of your program, some of you just prayed and asked for that gift of forgiveness. Just check this box right here. Let us know what you've done, and then we will send you some follow-up material in the mail. If you want to tell us that you're going to do that 60-60 experiment, just write it in the comments section or the prayer section, 60-60, and then I'll be praying for you over the next 60 days. So I want you to experience God like He says you can. I want you to get to the end of your will and start His will. So I'll be praying for you. And then what you do with this is drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes back on the back wall where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you again next time.